Okay, we will reconvene the bonding subcommittee state agency hearings. Up next, we have the Department of Administrative Services. I believe Commissioner Gilman and her team are on Zoom with us today. Commissioner, thank you for being here. You may begin your presentation and then we'll take some questions if that's okay with you.
Good afternoon. Good to see everybody. And I want to acknowledge Senator Moore, Representative Napoli, Senator Wang, Representative Piscopo, and other distinguished members of the General Bonding Subcommittee. My name is Michelle Gilman, and I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Administrative Services for the record. As you know, DAS utilizes bond funds for a variety of different projects and initiatives across our agency, ranging from IT, information technology, to project management, to initiatives involving digital equity, initiatives that we're moving forward today, school construction grants that we administer, including a new air quality or HVAC program, and many other services. So we have provided, per your request, several documents, including our 2022 unallocated bond report, which provides detailed information on all of the programs for which DAS has unallocated bonds. We have our 5-year capital improvement plan, which identifies capital improvements needed in the next 5 years at buildings that DAS controls or oversees. And there are many, many properties across the state that agencies specifically oversee, or that are leased properties that we work with respective landlords to oversee as well. We also have the DAS Facilities Management Pipeline Report, which provides an update on small and large construction process and projects that are in various stages of design and construction. We also have the DAS Facilities Management Annual Capital Expenditure Program request for 2023 through 2024, which provides our review of capital requests to the State Bond Commission for fiscal year 23-24. And then we've also provided answers to questions posed by the Office of Fiscal Analysis in advance of today's proceeding. So happy to answer any questions that you may have. I do have a number of our subject matter experts from our real estate and construction division, as well as our CFO, and happy to move forward on any questions that you may have today.
So great. Thank you for being here. And thank you for that nice overview. I guess I'll just start with some questions and then we'll go through the committee. Some committee members are here and some, of course, are in other public hearings or other JF deadlines, and some are on Zoom. So as they come in and out, I'll certainly acknowledge them and they can ask their questions at that time. One of my first questions is regarding school construction and air quality improvement. We certainly thank you and your agency for making that a priority. That's extremely important to us. A question that I have is the first round of awards, we were told that would be made sometime in February or March. Do you currently have a list of those awards?
This is for the air quality grant program, Representative?
Yes, it is.
Yep. So we are completing our evaluation. I expect that evaluation to be complete early this week, and then for us to release the awards and the award list for later this week or early next week. There are numerous complexities to the program, particularly as this is the first year that that program is being rolled out. And then with your approval, potentially additional years that program would be funded and implemented. So we are just finalizing our evaluation, but again, really look forward to rolling out those awards in the next week or so.
Okay, great. And the reason why I ask is because, certainly we want to see the interest in the program, a list of demands from school districts and what that looks like, because that's going to be helpful for us on our end as we go forward.
Thank you. We agree.
Earlier today, CME came in, and they're much, they have been awaiting bonding and their authorizations for quite some time now. Can you speak to that project and maybe perhaps highlight what the delay is?
Certainly. So this is the Office of Chief Medical Examiner, and I'm going to ask Peter Simmons, who's the Director of Project Management under our Division of Real Estate and Construction Services to provide an update on that project. Peter?
Thank you, Commissioners. Peter Simmons, Director of Project Management here at DAS. Thank you for your question. Yeah, we're in the selection process. Actually, we finished the selection process for the design team for the addition to the OCME facility in Farmington. There was a delay when we lost the project manager. He moved off to other opportunities, and we had to assign a new person, which has been done. And right now we're at the point where we're we're finalizing the contract. We should have a contract in place by May timeframe, and we'll begin to design then.
Okay, great. Thanks for your response. I appreciate it. A different question regarding the Clean Air Act. What percentage of the state's fleet is currently using electric or zero emission vehicles?
So thank you so much for the question, Representative. I'm going to also ask Steve McGurr, who's the Director of Fleet Operations, to provide an overview of our fleet. This is a subject that we're having great discussion, both within our fleet team and our project management team around electric vehicles, given the goals to have half of our electric vehicle, or half of our fleet, excuse me, be electric vehicles by 2026. And so we're looking certainly in our bond request before the legislature this year to not only assist us with acquiring fleet vehicles, but also to help us with the necessary infrastructure around charging and monitoring of those vehicles for metrics and reporting purposes. But Steve, can you provide some additional context and detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So the percentage that we currently have in our light duty fleet is less than 1%. We have 3,600 vehicles in our fleet that we provide to executive branch agencies, and our numbers are around 40 for electric vehicles. And out of 3,600, it's not a lot.
And what future funding is expected to be necessary to meet the goals outlined in the Clean Air Act that we passed last year?
So we would be looking to request 17.5 million in just vehicle purchases alone to not strain agencies' budget for the additional lease price, because there isn't price parity between the ICE vehicles and the EVs at this point. So that's taking our 3,600 vehicle fleet and subtracting out those that aren't required to be transitioned, such as SUVs and law enforcement vehicles, special upfit vehicles. We would be looking about 1,200 vehicles, and that cost to upgrade those is about 17.5 million. And that's just to reach 50% by 2026. That doesn't include 100% by 2030.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's very informative. And how is DAS working with other agencies, especially DEEP, SDE, and DOT, to implement the Clean Air Act, as far as the collaboration among the agencies?
So it's a great question, Representative. So we participate on the governor's GC3 committee to look at a number of sustainable initiatives that DAS can implement, not only within our agency, but across all executive agencies that participate and have opportunities to meet additional climate goal initiatives and benchmarks to meet the governor and the national goals. So not only with fleet, but also with building materials, with looking at solar opportunities, a multitude of other initiatives. We are working with agencies across the executive branch and beyond to really look at opportunities to work together. Steve can talk further about DOT, which has its own fleet, and also DESPE has its own as well. But Steve, perhaps you can talk a little bit about some of our cooperative efforts with those agencies and the other branches.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is 3 different fleets that are operated within the state. One is DESPI for their law enforcement fleet. There is DOT, which is mostly medium duty. And then there is also the DAS fleet, which is the light duty executive branch fleet of vehicles. We have really been focusing on transitioning the executive branch light duty fleet over to electric vehicles. I'm not really sure of what's going to happen with the medium duty fleet for DOT. But the vehicles that DOT does lease from us, they have been actually one of our biggest partners in getting their light duty fleet transition to electric, especially with their Newington headquarters facility project. And especially DESPI is not really going to be involved because, again, that's law enforcement. So that's not in the statute to transition to electric at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And thank you for your responses, by the way. They were extremely helpful. At this point, I will call on our bonding co-chair, Senator Moore. Senator, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Good to see
Good
you and
afternoon.
your staff.
You too,
Good to
Senator.
see you, Mr. Moore. So prior to you coming on, we talked to 2 agencies, DEMIS and the medical examiner. And I was a little bit taken back on some of their problems, especially the medical examiner, who's been not full accreditation, has been downgraded to provisional because of the workspace. So, you know, we were trying to determine, well, so what's the holdup here? And, you know, how long can we go? Because the next step will be that we're out of business. We can't do the business. And it appears that it's been 2 years since you've been engaged in this process for them on trying to figure out where their building's going to be and putting it out the bid. But at the end of the day, we've got to find out, when is this going to get done? And is your organization working with the medical examiner to help him understand how long he's going to be waiting and working in partnership with him to get it done? So I got to tell you, I was really alarmed when I heard that this was going on, and they didn't really have a good idea of what was, other than it was gone off the bid. When is this going to take place? And that they were not really engaged in the process. So I'm coming to you to say, so what's the deal? What can we expect? And when is it going to get done? Because my complaints have come from funeral home directors complaining about that. And out of dignity and respect for families that they're in trailers still, is just not acceptable. And I did share that I probably watched too much CSI, that I'm expecting them to be up to par, and I'm believing this is what we should have, and there's a standard, and I think we've fallen low below this standard. And I don't find that it's necessarily the medical examiner's job for the building. I think it falls on you all to get this done, and I need to know how quickly is this going to be done. And that there was some $22 million was spent, or 2.5 for a study. How was that money spent?
Certainly. Thank you, Senator, for the question. And we certainly share your commitment to moving these projects forward quickly, and particularly those that involve safety, compliance with federal and state standards. We take that very seriously, and again, appreciate your concerns and those of the committee today. We have indeed moved forward to contract for those services to move forward on this project. I'd ask Peter to provide a little more detail if he can. Also, our Deputy Commissioner Darren Hobbs from the Division of Real Estate and Construction Services is also here. What I want to emphasize is that our project management team has lost some staff due to attrition, retirements, and transfers to other state agencies and the private industry, quite frankly. So we have been working very closely with OPM and OLR, as well as our labor partners, to identify some opportunities to build back that team. And successfully, we're working to do that. It's been a very collaborative process and a strong one, but we have needed some time to build back that team. And again, we are doing that. We've brought on several new members to the team in the last few weeks. But I believe the project manager that was working on this specific project left our team for another agency, and that did delay us a bit in terms of rolling this out. So we apologize for that. But Darren or Peter, can you provide any other additional context in terms of where this project is, please?
Certainly. So my name is Darren Hobbs. I'm the Deputy Commissioner here at DAS. I think Peter mentioned a few of the points earlier in the testimony, but I would add that we're now in the process of signing the contract with the design team to be able to undertake the design for the work that's needed to be done at the building. It's quite a complex site. There's limited land available, some other challenges with keeping the building operational while we do the renovations and additions to the building. So the design may take somewhere in the order of 12 months. And then beyond that, then construction can commence. But we're fully engaged right now. Once that contract is signed, the design will be underway.
So are you saying it's going to be 12 months before even you can start the work?
Correct.
They could lose a by then, you know.
I think
He said he felt he only had like another year to pull it apart, to pull it together, and then after being on this probationary period, you know, provisional, that what happens next. So I would hope that you all would speed up the process. I want it done right. I don't want it to be done, you know, haphazardly, but I mean, if you have to shift, I'm not telling you how to run your organization either, please. But if you have to shift resources, I mean, it's like a priority that, you know, we get this done, because I think it's just unacceptable for people to be held in cold storage trailers in a building. I just don't see the dignity in that. And so I think they're a customer service organization and they serve a lot of people, and they should be able to meet the needs. And if there's a cog in the wheel, then you got to figure out what that is and get it moved. And then I understand a lot of people have been short-staffed in getting some of their projects done, but I don't think my constituents are going to accept that as a reason why we're not moving forward on some of this stuff. And I don't think the people who are morticians and the funeral parlors who have contacted me are going to accept that as acceptable, because they continue to pay for everything they're doing. They're going to expect us to get our jobs done. So I would hope that you all would have a priority list of what needs to get, because I can't see giving more money and we haven't even finished things that we've a lot of things money for, and it's not getting done because it's short staff. And maybe the answer is something else, but I don't know what it is. But that's not acceptable. The other was the garage in Bridgeport through Demas. Those two are, I told her about 25 calls for the garage in Bridgeport. That money was allocated in 2021. And I'm trying to figure out what happened, because people kept calling me saying, well, we know that it got moved on the bond, it was approved. So when can we expect it to be finished?
Thank you, Senator. So I'll ask Darren and Peter to update you on those projects as well. And I just want to follow up on the OCME project, that we will look internally at how we can move that project forward faster if possible, to perhaps compress the design turnaround, work closely with OCME on their accreditation and other federal issues that they may be looking at, and see where we can address those issues, so that they're part of that process, and that we're working closely with them around those timetables. So thank you again for raising those concerns, and we share them. So Darren and Peter, can you provide an update on the garages that Senator Moore has raised?
Sure. So thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Senator. The Greater Bridgeport Mental Health Center garage is actually in construction right now. It did run into some challenges where, as the work progressed, some additional corrosion was found in some of the structural elements of the garage. Those weren't foreseen or even detectable at the original design phase, so they were unforeseen, and therefore I had to have some additional design work performed to be able to address those. That design work has now cycled through, and we're able to get that back into construction again, but that was the cause for the delay on that project. So we expect that project to be completed around June of 2024, but it is in construction.
Well, thank you very much. I'll be following up, putting that on my radar. Because I'm gonna tell you, I think they thought I was responsible for getting that building up once we got the money, because they were calling me and sending me emails. I think there was a whole movement going on about that garage. And I told them I'm not in construction, I'm a legislator, but I will try to do my best to make sure it happens in a timely manner. So thank you for your team, and I'll stay in touch with you. And if I'd like to know if there's something that happens that delays it, then I'm at least given a warning, so I'm prepared to address it with my constituents. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Moore, thank you for those great questions. Now the chair would recognize the good ranking member, Representative Piscopo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate you, well, not being here. I wish you were here. I haven't met you yet, so it'd be good to, if I could meet you sometime in person, and I'm sorry you couldn't make it here.
Thank you, Representative. I'm sorry I was not able to be in person as well, but really look forward to meeting you in person. Look forward to doing that soon.
Thank you, and likewise. The chairs covered the medical examiner pretty quick. After they left, I think my questioning was out of frustration to them. They said I was hard on the medical examiner, and that was not my intention at all. I was just frustrated as to try and get a handle on what's going on with it. But I won't step on any of their words. I just want to say that I reflect, I want to just second their thoughts on the medical examiner's problem. The poor, they have, I think they're in danger of losing their accreditation. So time is of the essence. And my questioning was basically, where had the money gone before we lost the project manager? I think, in their testimony, they said they had, the words were current activity. I don't know if that money was spent or not. 1.3 million for an architect and $807,000 for a construction administration fee. Indeed, that tells me that the project was getting started online, at least had a plan, at least a drawing or something for 1.3 million. Can you fill me in on that?
Certainly. Again, I'm going to ask Darren and Peter from the team to provide additional detail about the status of this project, and any detail that they may not have right away. We can certainly provide additional detail after this hearing. Darren, Peter?
I can answer that. First, I don't know the context in which OCME provided their answers, but I can state that earlier in this session, there were some comments made about the 2.5 million being spent. That's not the case. That is actually the pre-construction budget for this project that has been approved by the State Bond Commission. That is the money that we're using to retain the design team for this. And ultimately, we'll be bringing on also a construction manager at risk to run this project. So that money hasn't been spent, but it is the money that's made available to us to prepare the designs necessary for this construction. I hope that that's an adequate answer for you.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. It's more than adequate. I must have just misinterpreted or read it wrong, the commissioner's original testimony. So, well, the medical examiner's original testimony. So I really appreciate that clarification. I think I have to go down to the medical examiner and owe him an apology. But anyway, with asbestos removal, this is my 35th session up here, and we've been doing this is my 35th session, and I think I've been on this bonding subcommittee for, a good 30 sessions out of that 35. So we've been doing asbestos removal since then. When do we see an end to removal of asbestos in our state-owned buildings? It seems that you just had 20 more million allocated last term for this purpose, and you have a $20 million unallocated balance. So can you enlighten me on any, is there any progress on asbestos removal?
Peter, can you please also comment on this? It's my understanding that this fund is not only asbestos, but also hazardous materials and other similar issues that may come up. But if you could provide additional context, I'd appreciate it.
I could speak in general as a construction professional with 35 years of experience. It is an ongoing issue. We have asbestos has been used as a go-to material for a lot more than just fire retardancy. It's also used for reinforcing in lightweight concrete, for instance. It's found in caulk. It's found in a lot of issues and materials, I should say. So we've got a lot of facilities that have been built, over 100 years in some cases, and so there will continue to be a need for abatement because as we get into more thorough renovations of projects and demolitions, this material does need to be dealt with, and so we continue to encounter this material as we both renovate and demolish. The good news is, from like the late 1980s, the material started to be, discontinued because they understood the health ramifications for the use of that. So ultimately, we won't be needing it, but I'm not counting on it occurring while I'm still here.
And Representative, if I could also add that David Barkin, who is our chief architect for the state, and also director of operations and process planning for DAS, can also add context to this issue. David is, I'll add a third title for him. He's also our sustainability officer, senior sustainability officer for DAS. So working closely on those climate change initiatives that I mentioned earlier. David?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, a little bit more context on hazardous materials in building. We have a huge inventory at the state of older buildings, as Pete Simmons just alluded to. And there are many campuses, for instance, that are just loaded with asbestos, even though those buildings are being surplus as we speak. So it's the budgets we're asking for have to deal with long-term addressing not those kinds of larger scale issues, as well as these little issues that come up in active buildings that we get from agencies on a regular basis for smaller work. Example I would use now is we're beginning to study a consolidation of state facilities with the possibility of surplusing, for example, a building on was it Woodland in Hartford. That's a building that's also loaded with asbestos, and if that building gets surplus, we'd be looking to clean that up. And these are jobs that take millions of dollars to clean up. So we're projecting a long-term need to continue to abate buildings, unfortunately, into the future. One of the things we're talking about internally with our team is thinking about this holistically and doing what the public schools are already required to do, is try to get our hands around the entire inventory of state buildings and assess them all, so we really have a good sense in hand of what hazardous materials remain in state buildings, so we can really project that around the future. And that's a discussion that we're just starting to have internally.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner. The grants and aid to municipality for the purpose of regional school district incentive grants. I see 5 million unallocated. Nothing's happened. No agency requests, no history of any being allocated. That's something that we could probably just take back for the subcommittee. Would you agree?
Representative, I would defer to the legislature and certainly OPM on this issue. I think we may have raised this as well last year with some questions. DAS has not used these funds, and we don't have a current plan as noted for these funds now. We are certainly open to continued conversation around best utilization for these funds, but would largely defer to, again, you and OPM regarding the future of this allocation.
Thank you very much for all your answers and to my questions. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the clarification on the medical examiner. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you for those good questions. Representative Mesker, you have the floor, sir.
So I too will want to focus on the coroner and the facility. According to the testimony by, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the pardon, I launched right in. I guess my question to DAS is related to, one, when are we going to close out architectural plans and the site specifications? I understand we've been through a pandemic. And I understand from the coroner that we have a brand new facility built in New Mexico. Now, I'm assuming the architectural design might be different, but the facility bones and structure would seem that they would be probably duplicative in terms of the New Mexico facility, so that might be a source in terms of what the architecture or the structure needs to accommodate. But the fact that we have ex-residents of Connecticut in tractor trailer refrigerator trucks is unacceptable. So we need to get this remedied sooner than later. I'd like your comments on that, and a question, if the 21.5 or the 23.5, it's not clear to me. I guess without architectural plans, that's a placeholder. And I'm assuming we're going to be dealing with significantly more money when we get there. And I'm not complaining about that. I'd like a comment about where we think we're going on bonding needs for a facility. And if we think it's in the same place. So that's kind of three questions, I guess.
So, Representative, thank you so much for the questions. If I could just clarify, I recognize you had a concern also on OCME. And then you also had a question on Garner, the Garner Correctional Institute.
No, I've only asked about the coroner and asked about our facility there. That's the only thing I'm caring about at this moment. I listened to our CME, Chief Medical Examiner, and I'm particularly concerned about the turnaround time in getting that facility. And when I was mentioning New Mexico, the coroner said they have a state-of-the-art facility that was recently built in New Mexico. Now, neither you nor I are residents of New Mexico, but if the facility for a 2 million population state was recently redesigned, in garnering an architect, getting plans, some of the fundamental recs or specs should be very, very similar if it's dealing with the deceased. I can't imagine that the needs are going to be explicitly so radically different between a deceased resident of New Mexico and a deceased resident of Connecticut.
Thank you, Representative. My apologies, and thank you for the clarification. So it's my understanding from the team that this property has some concerns in terms of the actual the actual site or the size of the site as we look at the modernization of that facility. So we are not able to compare it to other facilities that are in process or have been completed across the country. So again, we have to look at the actual footprint of that specific property and how we can navigate new construction there. But again, I do want to defer to Darren and Peter as well, again, in terms of any obstacles that they're seeing with this particular site. Thank you.
Yeah, you misunderstand me. You're either going to go vertical or horizontal if the site is suitable. The specs I'm referring to is the capacity, the service, the number of refrigerated units for those who've gone before us, that you can take care of the facility and run a good medical procedure. the specs will include the service and the demands and needs of the general population. That should help with an architect. The issue of whether we go vertical or horizontal is the wetlands and the issues. And if you need a new piece of property, we need to know. But I'd like to get a spec and with an idea of whether the 23.5 is a place card holder for a 40 or $50 million facility. But the fact that we have people in tractor trailers is unacceptable. And so I'd like to get it resolved sooner than later. And so I'm asking for, any kind of urgency. And what I'm suggesting is New Mexico just did this. Now, whether they went, so the components are going to be the same. The question is whether it's vertical or horizontal. The layout and the site is different. I understand, but we should be able to begin to imagine what we need for the price point on the building. And the second piece is, do we need a new piece of land?
Mhm. Thank you so much, Representative. I'm going to ask David Barkin, again, our chief architect, to comment here. I think he has some experience with the property itself. David?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. We conducted a study approximately 2 years ago, working with the OCME to determine what the scope they needed. We understand their facility needs and the complexity of their facility needs. The Commissioner mentioned earlier, one of the things is they have to maintain 100% operability throughout the construction phase. That does drive up cost relative to, say, a new building, but it would still be, we feel, less money to add to their building. The whole site is constrained by wetlands. We are trying to work within the given footprint, and we're surrounded by Yukon property as well. The budget developed looks at a construction start in next year sometime. We may be hit with some escalation, but I don't see the $22 million construction budget doubling or tripling in size to 50 million or anything close to that. I think we can do this project and serve their needs effectively, and continue to collaborate with the chief medical examiner and his staff.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Baumgartner, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, and your team for joining us this afternoon. I have a few questions. I'll start with specifically the surplus properties that we have within the state of Connecticut. In our corner of the state, we have properties that have been that were constructed well over 100 years old, are on the list of the National Historic Registry. Sites like Seaside and certainly the Mystic Oral School in my backyard in Groton. My question is with respect to Seaside in particular. I know the agency has proposed demolishing the building, and my question is, given that it is a historic building, I know it has fallen into neglect and disrepair for years now. Why the department is not making any effort to preserve these buildings and instead tearing them down, and at what cost?
Thank you so much, Representative. Good to see you as well. Thank you for the question. So I am going to ask David Barkin, who also has, he serves on several boards, historic preservation boards for the state. I'll ask him to comment on your question. I do want to acknowledge that we may have some limitations speaking about Seaside overall due to the ongoing litigation and other issues around that site. But David can certainly provide some overall broad context around the preservation of that facility and what we've been doing around those concerns. David?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Commissioner. This is kind of a tragedy in many ways, right? We have an important historic building that has been not used effectively for, I'm going to say, over 20 years, maybe even longer than that. It was originally intended to be developed, and then under a prior administration, it was decided to turn it into a state park. After that decision was made, my tenure with the state started around that time. We went through a comprehensive SEPA process with DEP, and came up with alternatives. That was a public process. We went through the entire process, and right now we're trying to finish that job and establish the park that within the budgetary parameters that were given. We did before that. There was many efforts to try to find another state agency that was willing to take on that building and repair it, or the buildings, the campus, and nobody stepped forward. UConn didn't step forward. State colleges and universities were not interested. It just becomes a challenge. What do we do? As you point out, there are many other campuses throughout the state that are in a state of disrepair and are, surplus structures, and there's just no need with the state to return them to state use, and the cost is prohibitive to do so. Just anecdotally, several years ago, when we were looking at what it would cost to just restore the exterior of the main hospital and the nurses building, we were looking at, as I recall, $30 to $40 million, and that's not making them usable. That's just fixing the outsides of them. These are big dollars, and that's it. I can't answer beyond that.
Yes, thank you for that. And I'll now pivot to school construction. I represent Groton, and unfortunately, in the last couple of years, we have seen some very concerning behavior with respect to the management of the school construction program. My first stint in the legislature, in Groton, we were beginning our Groton 2020 school construction plan. And again, within the last couple of years, we did learn of some issues with respect to decisions, again, in the regarding the bidding process with DAS. And I do want to be careful of obviously putting you, Commissioner, in a position to speak on an issue that is also kind of in the rungs of litigation and right now, and do want to be mindful of that. But with that said, in the past, communities such as my own in Groton have been pressured to accept bids that were not the lowest bids, and that is a huge breach of the public trust. And my question is to you with respect to the what DAS has been public about with preliminary investigations. What have you learned from this process, and how will it inform the school construction processes going forward?
Thank you so much, Representative. So first and foremost, the school construction director who served at that time is no longer with the state. I think most of our legislative delegation is aware of that, but for the public record, making note of that as well. And so what we have done since that director left is to restore faith and transparency and trust in the school construction grant program that DAS now administers. For a few years, that program was under another agency as well. And so coming back to DAS, we have worked very hard over the last year and a half to look again at the statutes and the regulations and follow those as a standard, as is appropriate, and to really make this a very narrow program, administering grants in the spirit of the law. And that also is respect to the bidding requirements that are also in our statutes. So when it comes to school construction programs, we require all projects to be bid. And there are really no situations where, to my knowledge, that can be waived, perhaps in an emergency situation where, there's flooding in a building or, a roof collapses or something of that circumstance. But for your standard school building projects, bidding is required and competitive bidding. So again, we have done we've taken a series of steps at DAS and with the school grants team to reassure schools of the steps that are involved in the program and the statutory obligations that we and they have, and the regulations as well, the processes and procedures. And we've also reminded school districts to come forward with any issues that they may have seen over the last few years under the previous director. And then we're working to streamline those processes as well, and to conduct webinars to be more accessible to our school districts with questions that they may have around the school program. And we've also done the same now with the HVAC air quality program, with both the priority list and the non-priority grants that we administer as well. And then I'd like to also think that and hope that we've engaged in a much more transparent level our communications with the legislative delegation and other stakeholders that are so interested in these programs. And they're obviously really important to our municipalities, to our students, to our school professionals and others. So I hope that that's helpful. Again, we've taken a number of steps to bring this program to where it needs to be. I always say that we can do more and we can do better, but I think certainly over the last year and a half, many of the steps that we've taken around separating out our audit functions versus the programmatic functions of the grant program, several of the audits that we have done around this program as well, and many of the other steps we've taken are only just a few of the steps that I wanted to mention here today.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I have great admiration and respect for you, and consider you someone of very high ethical standards, and very much take you at your word, and appreciate your very open and transparent answer in that. Lastly, in presenting this year's priority list, it was intimated that DAS may not be able to fund the entire list. Is the governor proposing any new authorizations for fiscal year 24? Is the funding sufficient for our future needs?
So the priority list, we presented the priority list to the Education Priority List Subcommittee back in January. And I believe the Education Committee was moving forward the list that was presented and voted on at that meeting. It's somewhere in the range of $10 billion for grant commitments that we have seen for applications, and that other communities have moving forward for various school construction grants. And so I hope that that's helpful background. I know our team at DAS, the governor's office, OPM, the Education Committee continue to work together on what those projects may represent, and then also looking at the funding associated with that as well.
And that would also include funding for our magnet schools?
Yes, so that's magnet schools, including our RESC system, the local school districts, through our municipalities. Yes.
Thank you again, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for
so
those
much.
questions. To close us out is our co-chair, Senator Moore. Senator, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm really sorry, but Representative Baumgarten triggered something, so blame it on him if I'm running over. It was on the school construction. I had two questions. Vocational schools, are they paid out of the school construction program?
So that is a question, Senator, that I will need to defer to my team on. That may be a separate bond authorization, but Darren or David, are you able to provide the information on that? So this is the technical and vocational high school construction.
Darren, you want to take that?
Go ahead, David.
Well, I was going to say, no, I believe it comes out of the same tranche of money that is in the, it's the same funding source that is used for technical high schools as is for the priority funding.
I'm sorry. So is that a yes, or is that a no?
Yes, they're not individually bonded projects like our typical projects are. They're coming out of that same overall grant fund at 100% reimbursed, obviously.
Okay. And then my final question will be about authorization of 75 million for improvements to air quality, including HVAC. So I know that there was a process, and I know the governor announced the release of another 150 million for our school quality improvements, that there was a round of applications, and I understand by the end of March, you should be announcing. Are you ready to announce those grants?
Yes, thank you, Senator. Our plan is to announce those really in the next week or so. We have taken a number of steps on this new program to be sure that we're scoring all of the competitive grant applications appropriately, and to work with our municipalities to ensure that they could send in all the information required. There was an additional extension of information depending on what that information was. They could provide that through the end of February. And so we've taken that additional amount of time to finish scoring the applications, and we expect to roll those grant awards out in the next week or so. But really excited to release that first round of funding to many of our school districts. And then again, with your support, legislative support, and the governor's support, excited about potentially rolling this out for the future, for future years.
So are you doing it? Is there just one round, or are there multiple rounds?
We expect to have one round this fiscal year.
And do you expect to spend all of that in that fiscal year for 23?
That is part of our remaining evaluation that we again expect to be done this week. And we'll be able to share more in the coming days about how much funding has been awarded, and any that's remaining, or any that we were not able to commit based on the funding. But we're happy.
Do you know how many applications you received?
130.
And what was the total amount of the ask of dollars for those? Do you know?
I do not have that offhand, but we can certainly provide that. Some of the applications, I will say, did not have full cost estimates around them. And so that's where some of the challenge came in with our evaluations on this program. So we still continue to work through those, those pending applications, and also with those municipalities. But we can get you more information in the coming days on that program.
All right, I look forward to just hearing the overall how the program rolls out. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you and your team for coming in. And Mr. Chair, I turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Commissioner, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you spending some time with us this afternoon. You and your staff were well prepared, and we look forward to working with you throughout the session. Feel free to reach out to any one of us at your convenience. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'll look forward to working with you.
Okay, so that concludes the Department of Administrative Services. Now we will start the Office of Policy and Management. Secretary Beckham and his team are here. And Secretary, whenever you're settled, you may begin a presentation before the board.
How about this one? That works. Well, good afternoon, Senator Moore, Representative Napoli, Senator Huang, Representative Piscopo, and distinguished members of the General Bonding Subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss OPM's capital programs. As you know, I was in front of you full Finance Committee last month to discuss the general capital program for the entire state, but today I'm here to talk about the capital budget request that involves those programs that OPM administers. Our capital budget request does include additional funding for the agency's existing capital programs. In fact, on page 2 of my testimony, you've got a list there of about 17 programs we currently administer in the agency. The first 8 or so should be familiar to you. They have been before you in previous bond acts over the years. New again this year, though, is number 6, the nonprofit Health and Human Services Grants and Aid Program. We're bringing that back after a few years away. Going to be asking for additional funds there, and we're looking forward to having that under consideration for a near-term bond agenda for the capital improvements for some of our nonprofit health and human services organizations. You've got attachment A to my testimony, which provides additional information about each of those line items, as well as an attachment B, I anticipated some interest in the body camera and dashboard camera grant program. It's a comprehensive list of the towns that have asked for and received funding under that program. And with that, I will entertain any questions you may have.
Thanks, Secretary. Quick question that I have. Town Aid Road, Secretary. Was that, so why was that taken out of the bonding subcommittee? In your opinion?
We transferred Town Aid Road from the capital program to the appropriations budget as a way of saving debt service. We can pay that out directly from the STF. We have a healthy balance in the STF these days. And by doing that, we don't have to borrow money and pay debt service.
Thanks for your answer on that. And then one more question, Secretary. Do you think LoCIP funding should be tied to inflation? Is that a good idea?
It would be unprecedented, generally unprecedented. We don't tie much of anything to inflation. I think, if memory serves, there was a recent tying of certain salaries to inflation, but we generally don't do that. We like to take a healthy look at where the state is in any given year, and along with our partners in the General Assembly, we like to assess what's going on and see what we can afford and what is sustainable going forward. So I would hate to agree to automatic funding of something, particularly if it was a big ticket item like that.
Great, thanks. Any further memory? Rep. Piscopo.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Appreciate you being here with your team. The House Chair asked a good question on LoCIP. I was wondering about a follow-up on STEEP. I see that nothing has been requested or allocated, requested or recommended by the governor for STEEP next year. This is good for, you know, those of us who serve some small towns. So I was wondering if you could give me just brief me on what would happen next in the coming fiscal year if some of our selectmen have a request, a sidewalk,
Sure.
a small request or something like that.
Well, I think I have good news. We have 30 million that is previously authorized but unallocated, so it's available for allocation at a near-term bond agenda. And we are asking for approval for another $30 million authorization for next year. So we have about 60 million available over the next 2 years.
Okay. And then there's a small line item, your Commission on Gun Violence Prevention and Protection. There's 12 million in not small, it's 12 million in unallocated bond money. And there has been no allocation or no governor's recommendation on that. Could you fill this?
Sure. So those funds, as indicated on page 5 of attachment A, were to be used as a grant and aid to a commission that was set up a number of years ago. That commission went forward, did some work, completed its work, and issued a report in 2021. So it is essentially done. That 12 million is out there. It is authorized. It could be theoretically reallocated or reprogrammed for something else. There are programs, particularly in DPH, who could probably use this kind of funding for those purposes, but that would be a discussion we'd have to have with the bonding committee next month or the month after when we talk about the final version of the Bond Act.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. May need a language.
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then relatively small, your responsible growth incentive fund, $2 million unallocated.
Yes. Let's see. Is that the transit-oriented districts?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's 2 million unallocated for the Responsible Growth Incentive Fund. The last time we did that was in last summer, as I recall. We did 6 million for TOD projects. We have 2 million left. Those are available for allocation at a future bond commission.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Well, that was good. That was it for me for now.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
questions. Our co-chair, Senator Moore. Senator, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So I want to go back to the $12 million, you know, that Commission on Gun Violence Prevention and Intervention is very dear to my heart. I'm wondering why the $12 million wasn't used.
Hey, I've been on the job for a year. No one asked for it in the time that I've been secretary. I think it predated me by a couple of years. So it was not allocated to date. So it is still there. But as I indicated, it could be reprogrammed with a language change to that original bond act. And there are programs at Department of Public Health who have the ability to spend that money as it was originally intended. So if that's something you would be interested in doing, we should work together on making sure that's in the final bond act this year.
And so then, thank you, sir. The other is regarding that funding. The governor has set aside $20 million or has some money in his budget for that. I want to make sure that we're not talking the same. I've had this conversation with the governor and Department of Health. I want to make sure that we're not talking about one pot of money, but we're talking about this 12 million and the 20 million, other $20 million is separate from this 12. Am I correct?
This is a distinct, it is a distinct authorization that predates our recommendations this year. So yes, it is a separate pot that we could use for those purposes, distinct from anything that we have in Department of Public Health this year.
So I actually put that money in the bond bill. I was there when it happened. So I'm hoping, and I've tried to get it moved and it's not been able to be moved, but I'm hoping we could do something this time with that and it doesn't interfere with the $20 million that he's set aside. And then I know that you moved TAR to approach, but the process for getting TAR funding, will it change on how a municipality could apply for that money?
No, that will still come from the Department of Transportation. In the same way that it always has. It'll just be general fund money instead of capital funds. I'm sorry.
Is
what's
that
the
correct?
Department of DOT, Transportation. Oh.
I'm
Well, it is-
sorry.
Yeah, yes, that's where the funds are, yes.
Where are the funds?
In the STF, the Special Transportation Fund. I'm sorry, I said general fund. That's what my staff was correcting me on.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Next, our ranking member, Senator Wong, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. Allow me to begin by saying that I appreciate the governor and OPM in reestablishing the commitment to the fiscal guardrails that we voted on earlier this year. It reflects kind of a change in regards to how we manage and bond in a sustainable and a manageable way to withstand the highs and lows, but also kind of establishing that we pay down our long-term debts and manage our budgeting process. So I want to compliment you and the governor and the legislative body for voting to support that. One of the questions that came up with Demas was the fact that there was a centralized nonprofit bonding allocation, which has not been funded, coming through the OPM's office and the governor's office. Can you explain a little bit what your thoughts are related to that kind of a centralized nonprofit bonding allocation, and what do you anticipate moving forward to address that? I know the commissioner cited that there was residual money from the ARPA money, and I believe that my notes tell me that there was 20 or 25 million that is allocated, but moving forward with the cliff of ARPA money running out, do you and the governor's office have any strategic plan and process to sustain our nonprofit funding 5 years, 10 years into the future?
Well, we budget 2 years at a time, so we do have plans for the next 2 years. There is authorized but unallocated funds of $45 million for the nonprofit grant program. And we are asking for the General Assembly to approve another $25 million per year for the next 2 years. So that's upwards of 90 million that will be available in the next couple of years. I hope to move with the governor's approval, some tranche of that at a near-term bond commission. And we also, on the approach side, if you will check our appropriations recommendations, we have I believe it's on page B15, one position and some funding resources in OPM to administer this specifically. So we have a meaningful and planful way forward to begin to make those resources available to our nonprofit providers for their capital expenses.
I appreciate that, and I will indeed follow up on the appropriations to see which the administration has determined will be able to get the funding. But when will be are you still accepting applications to be accepted into the program ongoing to the end of this budget year? And if so, or if not, what is the process for our nonprofits now to make these applications? Do they make it to OPM? Do they make it to the various agencies, departments, or do they make it to the legislative office?
I would say that going forward, since we are renewing the program after a number of years of it being not active, we will be standing up a new process. We would expect applications to come to OPM. We have a Health and Human Services Division where if we get the approval for the new position and resources, that's where that individual will be housed. We expect to consult with our Health and Human Services agencies who work with these nonprofits on a regular basis in terms of their needs, and certainly consult with them in making decisions about it going forward. But that's something we will be standing up as we move through this year. We'd like to get that approved by the General Assembly, both the new authorizations for capital expenses as well as the position at OPM to administer.
Thank you. And in light of transparency and accountability to be able to kind of see the prioritization, there's so many important areas that need our services, from critical social services, health services, senior related areas, mental health. Is there any prioritization program? I know you made the appropriations in that you presented in the budgetary, but is there any prioritization in regards to what area of focus, or is it just, what measure do you use for a sense of urgency and prioritization?
Well, we'll have to get back to you on that. We're going to be designing this again. As I say, it's been inactive for a number of years and we don't have a fully formed program yet, but we have made, in terms of prioritization, we have made other provisions in the Bond Act for some critical infrastructure needs at nursing homes, for example. So DSS will be going through a rubric there to deal with that issue, should that be approved. But we will be working and consulting with our Health and Human Services Agency on what their priorities are, what the facilities that are in greatest need, and who are performing the most intensive services for our residents.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, and I look forward to getting that information. And allow me to close by thanking you. You've always been available and informative, so I want to thank you. But also, I want to thank you for the changing culture that I talked about in looking at bonding and appropriations, in being able to fund initiatives that are sustainable and engaged at present, rather than a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year kind of a bonding initiative. And I'm appreciative of that, because the help is needed right now, and your allocation and prioritization reflecting that is welcome, because it's making differences in people's lives right now and affecting it into the future. So I want to thank you for that focus. And I want to thank the Mr. Chair of this subcommittee for allowing me to engage with you and ask the question. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Meskers, you have the floor.
Mr. Secretary, it's always good to see you. You always keep me on my toes with
you
your
as well.
presentation. I always prefer to be in front of the information, but I always seem behind when you get up to speak. So I'm very appreciative. I'm looking at, delving deep into OPM and the allocations, and the job frankly looks massive, and the administration of it looks massive. So I've had conversations with the DECD. I've had conversations in commerce. We've looked at some things in relation to grants. So within OPM, how prepared are you in relation to the efforts I see under Commissioner Boughton and Stephen Ochera on infrastructure, on bonding, and on requests? Because I'm concerned where we are at the state level, and not because of your job or your capacity in your job, but we've got 169 municipalities. So how do we roll out the information structure in terms of potential grants that are going to come through the Inflation Reduction Act, et cetera? And are we going to have specialists within your department, or how do we see it in terms of advisory work? And it's a policy question, I guess. what are we going to do to help the municipalities when they get to the shovel ready that you approve to make sure that we've maximized whatever's available at the federal level in the way of grant writing? And are we going to have any embedded personnel at the state level to maximize the drawdown from the feds? Because I guess what I'm getting to is hopefully we've got a structure, and then next year you come back and say we didn't need all the bond allocations because we were able to get some federal money coming through the system. So I guess it's a 30,000 foot question.
Yeah, there's a lot there. We always prefer federal funds to state funds. I'll say that off the top. We've done a number of things in the last year or so, as you know, with ARPA and before that coronavirus relief. We stood up at OPM a federal funds grant unit that is, we're having some flux there in terms of turnover, but we have a unit established in OPM for that purpose. You alluded to Commissioner Boughton.
Right.
Commissioner Boughton's team, who's working on coordinating among our agencies on the infrastructure. In my testimony today is $75 million unallocated for matching funds for IIJA. We also have funds in STF for DOT to do some extra match for additional monies coming down over the next couple of years, as well as previously authorized bond funds and ARPA funds for both DEEP and DPH, who are also the principal agencies getting a lot of that infrastructure money in the near term. With regard to assistance for municipalities, we're aware that municipalities got their own ARPA funds as well as CRF and have available some funds to match as needed. But we will stand ready to work with them if they need additional resources. I haven't heard of a specific ask in that regard, but certainly in terms of technical assistance, yes, my agency is always working with agencies to give them advice or counsel or try to help them work with the federal government if need be.
Okay, thank you. Just with the chair's permission. And that's just my particular question is that with 169 municipalities, you're going to be granting federal, either through federal allocations through the state. We're working to get them, federal and state monies. And my only question is there's going to be some that's going to be allocated directly from the federal government to the municipalities. And I'm just hoping that we as a group, and whether it's through OPM, is going to be prepared to advise them at the municipal level to maximize the federal funds that going directly down to that level. Because I think it's important that we, like your role in the state, that we get the municipalities to take as
Yes.
much federal money as humanly possible.
Yes, absolutely. We are routinely talking to municipalities about all sorts of problems, and we always stand ready to assist them, particularly when it comes to getting federal funds.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions. Representative Baumgartner, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and great to see you, Secretary, and your team. Looks like after this, we'll be done. So appreciate your time this afternoon again. With respect to the capital equipment purchase fund, can you provide a little bit of context as to what the state expends those dollars for?
Certainly. So that is statutory authorization. Refers to the purchase of state agency equipment. There's a list there of what qualified purchases are on page 1 of attachment A. It does have an unallocated balance currently of about $6 million. We're requesting $25 million in each of years of the biennium, which is historic levels of equipment needs that agencies have. But as you can see there, office equipment like printers, scanners, IT equipment, medical equipment, and machinery and state vehicles.
Excellent. And now with respect to the bond funded distressed municipalities grant, kind of how that differentiates from the appropriations grant of that same name?
That is an historic bond funded reimbursement for property tax loss for manufacturing and service facilities. It's DECD actually has to certify the facilities and the companies that are eligible for those exempt that are property that represents those exemptions, and it reimburses towns up to 50% of the tax revenue lost. And towns have to certify that the bonds received under this grant are used for capital projects only.
So for a community like mine in Groton, obviously in the last few years, the fabric of the community has changed significantly in that we have a massive new building on our waterfront for the Ohio Replacement Submarine Program. As a result, that is a building that the town will not be able to tap into as far as through an significant increase in the grant list as a result of the program. I know in the past there has been a M&E the exemption for manufacturing and equipment for communities such as Groton that have large industrial employers, obviously Electric Boat and Pfizer. And so while, over time, especially after evaluation, our property taxpayers have borne the largest increase in taxes, and whereas commercial and industrial taxpayers actually saw a reduction. So in future years, we're going to see a great employer like Electric Boat. They will be seeing, obviously significant growth, and we are fortunate for that, but we also want to make sure that towns, and certainly Groton, is kept whole. And so I asked that in large part because, when our towns will be making budgets over the years, I think the town would like to get a sense of what funding streams will be available, especially when there will be more folks coming into our town. That means obviously more police, more fire, and town services that will be needed. So I hope we can certainly continue those conversations should there be any funding issues in the future.
Certainly.
You're welcome to answer.
Well,
That's fine.
this might be a source of funds for Groton, depending upon DECD certification of facilities if they're eligible. But there are an array, as you point out, an array of other funding sources in the budget for distressed municipalities. But we're certainly continuing that conversation with you and with the Appropriates Committee, and as we go forward.
And lastly, a little pet project of mine. I submitted a bill this year that would allow municipalities to kind of jump onto the open CT platform. So open checkbook, open budget, something that then Comptroller Lembo really took the lead on, partnering with OPM and the Comptroller's office as a whole, I should note, and many of whom are now part of your team, and certainly one of your also your undersecretary, to say hello. But the pilot program would allow municipalities to utilize that software. And over the years, I think there is an issue with the licensing expiring. And as a result, the state of Connecticut no longer offers that program where municipalities can voluntarily kind of hop onto that if they want to disclose kind of financial information akin to what the state of Connecticut already does. So I think, again, in the spirit of transparency, if there's any way where we can kind of bring back that program, I don't know if it would require a bill, and considering it had already been done in the past, but would certainly welcome OPM's interest and involvement in perhaps, if there's any way this committee can be helpful in that respect, I'd be interested.
I will look into that one. That's a new one on me, but I will certainly look into that. Let
Thank
you
you.
know.
Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you. Any further questions? Secretary, thank you so much for being here. As Representative Metzger said, your office has a massive undertaking and you all do it well. So we thank you for being so accessible to the members of this committee. We look forward to working with you going forward.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we are at the conclusion of our agenda for today. I would call on our co-chair, Senator Moore, for some closing remarks.
Well, we did a great job today. We moved quickly through. Everybody was on time. Some great questions. Now we have to come together and figure out what are we going to do on a bigger level of authorizing and read through some of these. I think we'll have to have some meetings to talk about some of the things that we've heard today and discuss those. So I look forward to that next step. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for really doing a fabulous job leading this meeting. I appreciate you. And the rest of the team members also. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Piscopo.
Thank you. This has been quite a time with hearing from all the agencies, and I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate everybody coming and answering our questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Ranking Member, Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to compliment you for running an efficient and productive meeting. I've learned a lot, and the opportunity to engage in questions and answers with the various agency heads has been extremely helpful. And I'm very eager and look forward to working with the leadership of this committee to move this process forward with a lot of information. So well done, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Senator. And I just want to thank all of you and all the members of this committee. All of our members have either shown up here in the hearing room or certainly online, and all of them have asked informative and incisive questions, and we really appreciate that. And you are right. This has been a tremendous education for a lot of us. So I thank you all very much, and we will have a follow-up meeting. So please check your emails. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to us. And I also want to thank the state agencies who came forward. They had to put a lot of effort and time in and prepare for the tough questions that our board asked. And we did ask some very tough questions, and they were, again, well prepared. And last but not least, I want to thank our staff over at Finance, Revenue, and Bonding for making all this a smooth process. Without them, we don't get there. So thanks, everybody.